All right. Hello, Trailblazers. Welcome to the most secure session of Sea Dreaming. Please join me to welcome Sandhya Sambasivan, where she will share with us one of the Salesforce security feature. Welcome.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Pillai, for the introduction. Hello everyone. It is I feel very honored to be here in Sea Dreaming to speak here. So let's go into the session. Hello everyone. A warm welcome to all of you. Let me introduce myself. I'm Sandhya Sambasivan. I'm working as a solution architect at UST, Salesforce Certified Application Architect and Trailhead Ranger. I'm also a co-developer group co-lead. You can reach me in Twitter and LinkedIn. A big thank you to all sponsors of Sea Dreaming for giving us such a fantastic platform. And also hats off to our dearest Sea Dreaming coordinators for such a beautifully organized event. Now let us move on to the session. As you all know, encryption scrambles information so that only people with right decoder key can unscramble it. Systems can use complex algorithms that use multiple keys to scramble and unscramble the data. In this way, encryption helps to prevent unauthorized people from accessing the data. My session for today is a closer look on Shield Platform Encryption. Let us see the agenda. First is overview of Shield Platform Encryption, classic versus Shield Platform Encryption, different types of encryption, best practices and considerations, and setup of Shield Platform Encryption in Salesforce. Let us first see what is Shield Platform Encryption. So with Shield Platform Encryption, you can encrypt all kind of confidential and sensitive data at rest on Salesforce platform. The data is encrypted with a stronger 256-bit AES key. When I say encrypt sensitive data at rest, that means any data which is stored inside Salesforce. It can be on objects or files, etc. Subscribers can manage to access their data using a wide range of keys and permissions. So Shield Platform Encryption adds a new layer of this security to meet the industry and regulatory requirements. And the encryption is done using a key material. So this is never saved or shared across orgs. And this is customer-driven encryption key. That means there is a role for the customer also in keeping this encryption key. Shield Platform Encryption is available as free in developer editions. But this includes a license cost when we are doing it for other editions. And the setup is very quick. Let us go into details. Now let us see what is the need for Shield Platform Encryption. So the common use case would be for compliance requirements or contractual obligations. So one example which I can give is storing any personal information for bank or credit card. The data we have to store it in a secure way, or to store any medical data, store any personally identifiable data, or some data related to health. So all these cases, the data need to be securely stored inside Salesforce. So encryption is behind the scenes working to protect these data inside Salesforce. Our discussion topic is Shield Platform Encryption, but again, Salesforce offers two ways to encrypt data. The first one is classic encryption and second one is Shield Platform Encryption. Let us see the difference between these two. In pricing term, the classic encryption is included in the base user license. For platform encryption, additional fees applies. Both are for encrypting data at rest. Encryption algorithm is 128-bit AES for classic and 256-bit AES for platform encryption. Masking is available only for classic encryption. When I say masking, that means that if you have something like a social security number, you can mask the numbers at the end. So you would have seen for the credit cards and all, when you do a payment, there will be display only the first digits will be masked and only last 3 or 4 digits will be displayed. So that is what masking is. It is available only for classic, not for platform. And encrypting standard fields is available only for platform encryption. It is not there for classic. Encryption of custom fields is available for classic, but there is some limitation of 175 characters. Platform encryption supports encrypting custom fields, but not all the field types are supported. Managed encryption key permission is applicable only for the platform encryption and not for classic encryption. Now let us focus back on Shield Platform Encryption. Keys and secrets work together to provide additional layer of security. Let us see how encryption key is formed for Shield Platform Encryption. First is a master secret. This is managed by Salesforce, and Salesforce generates a new master secret 3 times a year with each release. This is stored in key derivation service. Next is a tenant secret, which is managed by the customer and can be rotated once per day in production. This is stored in the DB. And both of these together, both of these secrets together is used to derive the data encryption key. This is stored in cache. Let us see how this encryption works behind the scene. When user saves data in Salesforce, consider an example of a custom field. First, check what is done internally is that whether encryption of that particular field is required or not. If it is not required, then the data is stored in Salesforce in the DB. If encryption is required, then rest of the work is done by a service called encryption service. So the first step for this encryption service is to check for a data encryption key. It checks first in the cache memory whether a matching data encryption key is available there or not. If it is available, then it retrieves the encryption key. If it is not available, the matching key is not available, then the service sends a derivation request to a key derivation server. And the response, it will send back to the encryption service. After retrieving or deriving, when I said retrieving from the cache memory, if it is deriving, that means coming from the derivation service. So after getting this encryption key, then the next step is that encryption service generates a random initialization vector and encrypt the data. Once the data is encrypted, then it is called the ciphertext. The ciphertext is what is stored in the database or the file storage if you are encrypting the files. So this is how the encryption works behind the scenes. I have given a visual classification of encryption Salesforce offers. So first two are the classic encryption and Shield Platform Encryption, which we have already seen. So the next one is Shield Platform Encryption is also divided into deterministic or probabilistic. And again, under deterministic, there are two options, case sensitive or case insensitive encryption. So let us see the deterministic probabilistic in detail. Let us move on to the next slide. First, let us see probabilistic encryption. Probabilistic encryption introduces an element of chance. Source text repeatedly encrypted with the same key will not yield the same ciphertext. It gives different ciphertext. If we give an example, if hello world is the data, which we are going to consider now, if we encrypt it using probabilistic encryption, it will not always correspond to same ciphertext. Instead, the message would produce one of the many possible ciphertext each time it is encrypted. So this probabilistic encryption is so secure that it cannot be, when the logic is executed in the database or when we are comparing the values to a string to each other, it always differ because it is stored as random patternless strings. The data is stored as random patternless strings. So we cannot use any comparison of data when we are using this probabilistic encryption. Because of which, if you're doing an SQL query, you cannot have probabilistic encryption enabled fields in the where clause because you cannot filter on those fields because the data is very random or patternless. It is always recommended to use probabilistic encryption whenever data in a field will not be needed to be filtered on. And by default, Salesforce encrypts data using probabilistic encryption scheme. Now let us see what are the considerations when we use the probabilistic encryption. There are many considerations when we are setting up platform encryption for an org. I have listed only a few here. Not all the custom field types are supported by encryption. The supported ones are email, phone, text area, long, rich text, URL, and date. Encrypted fields are not supported in criteria-based sharing rule or schema builder and in external objects. For formula fields, not all the functions are supported by encryption. In SOQL and SOSL, we cannot include aggregate functions in the query. Also, the where clause is not supported as we have discussed earlier, and group by and order by are also not supported. Now let us see deterministic encryption. Moving on to the next slide. The advantage of deterministic encryption over probabilistic is that here we can have filters on the encrypted data. So for deterministic, it uses a static initialization vector so that encrypted data can be matched to a particular field value. The initialization vector is unique for a given field in a given org and can be decrypted only with your specific encryption key. The ciphertext can be repeatedly produced given the same source text and key. That means if hello world is the data and if it is converted to this particular ciphertext, you can see a ciphertext given there as an example. It produces the same one provided you give the same source text and key. In the case of probabilistic, it used to give random and patternless strings. In the case of deterministic, it is always going to give the same ciphertext. And deterministic encryption allows for the user to specify if case sensitivity on the record values need to be accounted for. So if it is case sensitive, different ciphertext strings is used to identify case sensitive data. In case of case insensitive, it uses the same ciphertext value for both. Let us move on to the next slide to see what are the considerations we have to see when planning to build app with encryption. First step would be to define a threat model and then encrypt only whenever necessary because not all the fields should be encrypted. Only whichever fields which we think as sensitive and need to be encrypted, only those should be encrypted. Then create a strategy for early backing up and archiving keys and data. So these keys are something very important. Once the keys are generated using the tenant secret, we have to export and keep it securely because once it is destroyed, then we cannot recover it. So we have to be very careful with the strategy of backing up and archiving the keys. Then the next very important step is that we have to consider all the considerations and their implications if we enable platform encryption in the org. Next is analyze and test App Exchange apps before deploying them. So the apps should be tested thoroughly and analyzed thoroughly for platform encryption. Then the next one is to use out-of-box security tools rather than using crypto functions. We should be using the out-of-box security tools. When we talk about best practices, grant the manage encryption keys user permission to authorized users only, assign permissions and key access judiciously. Also handle currency and number data with care. Communicate to your users about the impact of encryption. Then encrypt your data using the most current key. And again, use discretion when logging as another user, if you're granting login access to another user or Salesforce support. Then rotate the key periodically as per the best practice, and also synchronize your existing data with your active key material. Now let us see key management and self-service background encryption. I'll be showing the Salesforce setup screen where we are doing this key management and self-service background encryption. So when you are turning on encryption for the first time in your org, or you are turning on encryption for specific fields or other data, only the newly created and edited data are automatically encrypted with the most recent key. So the data which is already available in your org doesn't automatically get encrypted. So for that, we have two options, either to do a background encryption. Salesforce is offering a self-service background encryption. Using that, we will be able to encrypt the existing data. So if data volume is huge in millions, then we can request help from Salesforce support to encrypt the existing data. Now, as a best practice, when you change your tenant secret as part of the rotation strategy, then the data which is already existing will be already encrypted with the old tenant secret. So there also we can make use of this background encryption service to encrypt the old data also to the newly rotated tenant secret. Again, when you synchronize the data, the record will not get updated with the last modified date or last modified ID. The timestamps will not change. Except system mode stamp. And also, we should be very careful about destroying the key material. So if there is a your 10 secret is very important, even Salesforce will not be able to retrieve the data if it is already destroyed. By any chance, it is always best practice to export this key material, tenant secret, and keep it in a secure place, so that by any chance, if you want to extract your data, encrypted data, later you can upload this key material and then you can get the data. So it is very important that we should be safely keeping this key material. Now, what are the things we have to note when a sandbox is getting refreshed, which is having encryption enabled in production? So let's see what are the things we have to note. If Shield Platform Encryption is enabled on production org, all encryption settings are copied, including the tenant secrets created in production, to the sandboxes. But once the sandbox is refreshed, the tenant secret changes, if you do any changes, are confined to your org itself, your current sandbox only. So as a best practice, it is always better that we rotate the tenant secrets on the sandbox after refresh. Let's move on to the next slide. There are a few considerations you have to keep in mind while building apps with Shield Platform Encryption. Let's see the consideration of source and target organization. So when I said source, it is somewhere where you're developing the app, and target is somewhere you are deploying your app. It can be using various deployment method or even as a managed package. Okay, so if the source is enabled, target is also sheet enabled, then the result is that the field attribute indicates enablement. If source is enabled but target is not enabled, that means encrypted field is ignored. Shield platform encryption, if it is not enabled in the source org and it is enabled in the target org, then the result is that you will have some issues. If you're doing a managed package, then it will, when you're trying to install the managed package, it will hit some error, because as we all know, this Shield platform, when you are encrypting, if for any particular fields, there are a set of considerations that this should not be there in the filter criteria like that. So if we are not building apps considering all these factors, then when we are installing that in the target environment, it will hit error. So whenever building app, if there is a possibility that in target organization there is a possibility for platform encryption enabling, then when building apps we have to ensure that the app should be Shield platform encryption ready. Then only, so when you are building itself, you have to consider all the factors, uh, just like if your app is platform encrypted. I have already logged into my Salesforce environment. The first step to set up Shield Platform Encryption is to create a permission set with Manage Encryption key enabled. Once the user is assigned to that permission set, they'll be able to see this under the Platform Encryption under Setup. Under Key Management, we'll be able to generate the tenant secret, and the key can be exported and kept securely. By default, it is probabilistic encryption which is enabled. If you want to enable deterministic as well, that can be done under advanced settings. So this is here, you can see that this is enabled already. And there are many other advanced settings available under this advanced settings under platform encryption. Now, moving on to the encryption policy. So here there are options to encrypt files and attachment, encrypt chatter, encrypt search indexes, encrypt change data capture events and platform events. And also there is another option where you can encrypt standard fields. So I'm clicking on that. So you can see that standard fields are given here. I'm clicking on edit here. So there is a choice for the encryption scheme, whether it should be probabilistic, deterministic case sensitive, or deterministic case insensitive. So we'll be able to choose any of the encryption scheme and save the data here. Once encryption is enabled, you'll be receiving the email on encryption is enabled for these fields. If there is any error because of some queries on, if there is, say for example, if it is probabilistic and this particular field is referenced in any filters, then it will throw an error and you'll be getting an email on that. That is under the encryption policy. Now, let me show a custom field which can be encrypted. So this is a custom field which I have created of data type as text. You can see that there is a checkbox for encrypting here. So once the checkbox of encrypt the contents of this field is done, you can see there are three options. So we'll be able to choose whether to use probabilistic or deterministic here. Only when deterministic is enabled under advanced settings under setup, this option, these other two options will be shown. Otherwise, it is always probabilistic encryption. Now, one more point I want to cover is the encryption statistics. This is the encryption statistics and data sync page. Here, all the objects will be listed here, which needs encryption. And once you click one of the object on the right hand side, you can see all the fields which are encryption enabled and the data, like how many records are encrypted as of now and how many are unencrypted. So based on the unencrypted records, we'll be able to click on sync and the data can be encrypted. So this will come into picture when you already have some existing data and you have enabled encryption at a later point of time. So all the existing data can be encrypted using the sync button. So that's all about platform encryption enabling. So it's such a simple setup and very easy and quick to do. These are the resources I have referenced to prepare this session. These are Salesforce documentation links. With this, we are winding up the session. Thank you all for your support by attending this session. I hope you got some insights on platform encryption. And hats off to all Children coordinators for such a well organized event. I appreciate all your effort you have taken to coordinate this. And everyone, wishing you a wonderful day ahead with more sessions by fantastic speakers. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have for Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sandhya, for such a powerful content. We have a bunch of questions coming in while you're presenting just now. Okay, are you ready to answer them now, Sandhya?
Thank you, Pila. Yes.
Okay, so let's take the first questions, all right? Our first questions coming from Prakash. While you're presenting, right, he do ask uh, about can we encrypt endpoints using Shield Platform Encryption?
Okay, so by endpoint, I believe he means for integration, any service, web service endpoints. So Shield Platform Encryption is actually for securing the data at rest. So if you are storing this endpoint in any particular field, then that data will be encrypted. But if it is for any service, for any integration that he's planning to have, then I would suggest that we can use name credentials instead of Shield Platform Encryption.
Okay. So I think that is a good response. Yeah. Prakash, hope that is a takeaway from you, and Sandhya have give you the answer. Okay. Then the second questions come from one of our fellow trailblazer. Yeah. He is in dilemma. He said he's not too sure which encryption type to use, like based on the content that you have presented just now. He's asking for your advice, right? How do we decide when to use the probabilistic encryption and when to use the deterministic encryption? Any advice from you, Sandhya?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. So, as we discussed in the session, it is probabilistic encryption which is enabled by default, and it is patternless. So, since it is patternless, there are a few considerations when we use this probabilistic encryption. That is because we cannot use it for formula fields. There are many limitations, and also if there is more SQL queries which are being used, all those will get impacted. We cannot use that in the where clause. So I see a restriction there when you're using a probabilistic encryption. But if in your requirement, if you want to have, it is very required to have in the where clause, if you want to use the fields which are already encrypted, then we can have this option with deterministic encryption, where it allows using filters. I mean, in the where clause also, you'll be able to use um, uh, the encrypted the fields. So that is the main difference between these two. So deterministic, even though probabilistic is patternless, deterministic offers a much more flexibility than probabilistic. So based on the requirement, you can choose that.
All right. Thank you, Sandhya. I think that give a very clear distinction and help us and help our fellow trailblazer to decide which encryption type to choose. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, correct.
So, Sandhya, there's also another questions coming from our trailblazers who often need to pull Salesforce report. Yeah. Um, when she mentioned this, uh, often to her means that almost every day. Yeah. So it's
Mhm.
part of her job that she need to pull reports. Yeah. So she want to know that how do this encryption right impact the data that she will be building in the Salesforce report, and because the organization that she work with, right, it's trying to implement encryption, so she want to know what is the impact of encryption to the Salesforce report.
Okay. So before enabling platform encryption, there are lots of considerations, and we have to very specifically see what are the impacts on our existing system if for any current project which is already there. When we are newly implementing platform encryption, there can be many impacts. Like there might be many changes to be done. So all those things need to be analyzed thoroughly before enabling platform encryption. And I hadn't covered about reports on the session, but again, that's a really good question, so that I can cover it now. So report filters also have impact on enabling platform encryption. You cannot use filters, the encrypted fields in the filters for a report. So Pillai, that is the answer for that.
Okay, cool, thank you. I think our trailblazer have a some assurance from you that conclusion is her Salesforce reports actually does not impact too much, so she can feel at ease. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a
So
filters mostly, Pillai. Report filters get impacted. Yeah.
okay, cool. That's really awesome to find out. Okay. So Sandhya, while you prepare this content and share with our fellow trailblazers on the call, right? What is the most challenging moment that you experience when you first start with a Shield platform encryption? Um, being that from the resource wise, from the knowledge wise, what do you mind to share with us, right? The most challenging moment that you encounter.
Okay. Yes, Pillai. So enabling encryption, as you saw, the setup is very easy, but analyzing the impacts, that is very crucial, as I mentioned. And also, uh, the first, from a business perspective, from a requirement perspective, we have to know which are the fields to be encrypted. So that's the first step. But it is always based on the fields. So not all the fields should be, we should not think like, hey, I want to have maximum security for my for all my objects, custom objects or standard objects, so I'll enable Shield Platform Encryption for all the fields. No, it should not be like that. Shield Platform Encryption should be enabled only for the required, very necessary fields which you think security is very important. So that's the first step. So identifying all those for any existing implementations, identifying such fields from the fields or files from the current implementation, that is a very crucial step, and it takes time. And again, so I would say it is challenging, but still we have to thoroughly analyze all this kind of, these are prerequisites before enabling Shield encryption. So it is always better that we have after we have to first enable all these required set of fields in lower environment, test it thoroughly, and then only it should be live in production. So that kind of homework we have to ensure that it is completed before we are giving that to the customers. And again, and not only that, not only after identifying the fields or files, we have to the data which has to be protected. The next step is that we have to see if there is any other impacts on these data or these fields which are already, if there is any custom code involved in it, whether is there any queries which get impacted. If it is a SQL query, then if it is there in the where clause, we will not be able to enable encryption if the fields are already used in the where clause, unless you remove that restriction from the code. So you have to clean up the code first, then only you'll be able to implement this encryption on the specific fields. Otherwise it will keep on throwing error. So you'll get the email at the if you try to enable it, and if the enabling Shield platform encryption fail, you'll get an email. So from that itself, you'll understand what are all the implications, and you have to clean up all those items. Then only you will be able to check that checkbox of encryption. So I think while implementing this four particular requirement from my perspective, after identifying these fields, then implementing that on the already existing Salesforce code or a Salesforce application was a bit challenging from my perspective, Pillai.
Okay, so thank you, Sandhya, for the Q&A session. You have bring to us and shared to us a lot of precious information, and we really value that. Thank you. And for all the trailblazers, thank you for attending these sessions. Remember to fill in the survey form before you leave this session. And also, please go to the demo jam session now and have some fun there. Okay, see you soon.
Thank you all for
Okay.
attending the session. Thank you. Bye bye.